Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right.
Hello, Fortitude audience. This is Heather Kittleson, your host, and I am accompanied with my husband, Amos.
Hello.
And across from me, I have wonderful Paul DeJong, who is a recent friend. We have met through serving on the Arboretum board together, and we have only been in each other's presence about 4 different times. And I am so grateful to have you here with me today. So thank you.
Well, that's great. It's kind of interesting how this happened. Like I said, we met, you recently joined the board, and I think I had seen you there once. This is the second time we crossed paths, and we had a very nice conversation. I realized quickly we were kind of kindred spirits. We had been through some challenge in life, like most everybody that walks this earth has, but we connected pretty quickly. Heard your story about you and Amos. I've had a chance to listen to some of your podcasts, and I like what I hear. It's a very interesting story. Like you said, sometimes we all go through challenges. Nobody even realizes it. And sometimes you can help somebody on a given day just by being kind. And a lot of this is just basic human kindness. It's not rocket science. It's just being nice and spiritual to one another.
That is, yes, amen to that, Paul. The reason I was so excited to have you on here is because you have left a legacy already here in the Sioux Falls area. You have a lot of people who love and admire and really do cherish you as a leader of our community. And so for those of us who are listening that aren't right here in the Sioux Falls area, I'd love for you to just give us a little bit of who you are, where you're from, what your current, I guess, just your life is at this juncture. And then we're going to get a little bit into your history from your car accident, then to the spider bite and all the things that, the adversity that you've gone through. But let's hear all the good stuff about Paul.
And first of all, I'll start out when you mentioned adversity, we've all went through this, but I've learned to refer to them as tragic blessings. I read the book once that was called that, and I thought that was a great analogy because of all so-called not so nice things, you reap some benefits too. But I grew up in Northwest Iowa, was fortunate to grow up in a very spiritual Christian family, went to a Christian elementary school, Christian high school, and I was kind of at a loss. I went to have an associate's degree. I was always going to go back later and get my bachelor's degree, and my significant other at the time was going to school here, and I happened to ride by, at that time it was called Lakeland Nursery. I was on my way into town recently, graduated from school. I had I even forget what year Grand Prix and my couple suitcases full of clothes. I remember I stayed at my uncle and aunt for a while, and I stopped. It was Lakeland Nursery at that time, a small garden center, and at that day and age, I liked working outside, like getting a suntan. I thought this might be a good job, summer job, till I find my real job. And like I said, I was kind of floundering what I wanted to do in life. And within a short time, I knew what I wanted to do. I just loved it, just the atmosphere, being outside. And part of it was I've always liked helping people. And you look at landscaping, you might say, how's that really helping people? But I was helping people enjoy their outdoor living experience. It's not about planting trees or doing a front landscape. It's adding quality family time where they can spend more time outside. It's changing their curb appeal, so it's making pride of ownership. So I fell in love with it very quickly.
In landscape, I think of the fireplace. You and I were speaking about that, about fireplace and about inviting your neighbors over. So truly the experience and the memories that you were creating by making the front yard and the backyard and their environment beautiful.
Yes, and landscaping has changed a great deal since, this was close to 40 years ago. So then it was a few shrubs and a few perennials, maybe a tree in the front yard. And now it's evolved into this water features.
Yes, it has.
The outdoor living areas where you entertain guests and people. So it is really about entertaining and being able to socialize with either family or friends.
Yes. And that was your first job after you got out of college and moved here. Is that correct? You were working at
That's correct. And
Okay.
at that time, like I said, I had no money in my pocket. So I
Yeah.
have nothing against this particular establishment, but I rented a room for a month at the Deluxe Motel on Western Avenue. And I remember there was either an Embers or Frying Pan next door. So I think you could get bacon and eggs and toast or whatever it was for 99 cents or $1.99. So for a while there, after I lived there, I couldn't eat eggs for a while because that's what I
bet.
existed on. But I've told and every time I bring up that story to my kids, they kind of roll their eyes. Yes, Dad, we've heard this story a million times. So they've had their fill of it, like I had my fill of eggs and bacon.
That's great, Paul. Okay, so moving a little bit to, you have three beautiful kids.
I have 3 children whom I love dearly and very proud of.
Yes, Tyler, Alex, and Maddie.
Yes, and Maddie's referred to as the golden child by their brothers, but I said they didn't actually grow up very abused. They had a pretty good life too, but little sisters, as you know, probably get picked on a little more.
We do, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Because you're the youngest of 4, if I recall.
Yep. My 3 older brothers, they definitely gave me a run for my money, but I am tougher today because of them. So I'm grateful.
My daughter, Maddie, was a point guard in basketball, and she could take a beating and keep ticking, but she always said she always got beat up by her older brothers, which she did from time to time.
Yeah.
I was the oldest of 5, and I never beat anyone up.
Well,
Maybe I should have. Maybe I should. Maybe it's not too late.
no, all your siblings turned out really well without you
They
having
did.
to do
This
that.
is true.
Well, you have a kind spirit, Amos, so I won't be too
It's
hard
not in
on
my
this.
nature. This is true.
And that's a good attribute.
So, Paul, I'm going to fast forward just a little bit because you got a little taste of landscaping, and then you became the owner of Landscape Gardens, which is a very, very large nursery. I mean, it's beautiful. It's turned into something just magnificent. You go in there and it's a whole experience all in itself. And so you became a very prominent business owner through a little bit of taste of landscaping when you were right out of college to then turning around and working and owning and becoming a very prominent business owner here in Sioux Falls.
I would like to think so. And the founder, Phil Helland, who is a real strong mentor along with my father and his son, we bought out the rest of his interest. And we also bought, prior to that, which at the advice of my father, there was about 100 acres of land for sale, which is now, at that time, you got to look back, it was all farm fields, 2 or 3 farms between 57th Street and Landscape Garden Center, which worked out pretty well for us. But I just threw caution in the wind and turned out to be one of my best decisions I ever made. So that leapfrogged me into an ownership position. Like I said, I'm very fortunate. This is God directing me. Like you said, we've all had some adversity, but I've been so blessed in so many ways. And one of those is I never, and I'm sure there might have been a few, but very seldom did I not hop out of bed and want to just rush to work because it was just a labor of love.
Yeah. That's everybody hopes and wishes and dreams that that's the case, to get up in the morning and be super excited about what they're going to do.
And the unfortunate thing, there's a fair amount of people that don't really love what they do, and I don't envy them at all. And if I don't mean to be drastic, but if you don't thoroughly enjoy what you do, I know you got bills to pay, but try to find something different, because once you find the right thing, you'll know it.
Yep. And follow your heart, follow your gut instinct of what you're passionate about, because if you do that, it's a whole nother world. You become the person that God created you to be when you follow your heart and your passion.
Yes, because young people quite often ask me, when did you know? And I said, basically it just kind of falls out of the air. So obviously you have to plan ahead, but don't be too hard on yourself when you don't know exactly what you want to do. Mm-hmm. Don't rush yourself. Like I'm fortunate to know the founder of Pizza Ranch, A.J. Grunewig, from Orange City, Iowa. Now we grew up together and got in a fair amount of trouble, and he had no idea what he wanted to do. And he started working at a pizza place, and him and his mother fiddled around with some recipes, and he opened the first Pizza Ranch in Hull, Iowa, which I ate it before it was open. That's my claim to fame.
That's
And now
really
I believe
neat.
there's over 300 franchise restaurants. And he tells young people the same thing. Don't be so hard on yourself. God will direct you in time. And when you find it, you'll know.
Paul, it would have been an honor to work for you. Just in the short amount of time that getting to know you, I have learned a lot already. So to be under your leadership and work for someone like you would have just been such a fun gig.
I like to think I made a difference, and I tried to be a positive impact on as many people's lives because, I always say number 1 on the list is treat your customers and employees with respect. And number 3 on the list is treat your customers and employees with respect. And all of us in life, we deserve to be respected no matter what role we play. And I'm not trying to pick on any careers or anything, so I'm not even going to bring up certain careers that are looked as maybe not as because everybody's your superior in some way.
Yes. Yep. Someone once told me that, a restaurant, all the different jobs in a restaurant, what do you think is the lowest one at a restaurant? And people will naturally say dishwasher. And then in return, you look at that and you go, actually, they're one of the most important, because would you eat at that restaurant if they had dirty dishes? Right? So it comes full circle as to every single person has a valuable job.
And I got to share a story, and I don't want to blow my own horn, but there was a convenience store that I frequented, and there was several ladies that worked there, and I got to know them pretty well. They'd always come in, and as my health was declining, or I'd have a hard time getting around, they knew what I wanted, so they'd go get it as I walked in the door, and I thought that was so respectful. And then this happened to be this fall when I was still driving before my voice strongly suggested I hang up the keys. I went in there, and I fell outside. And these same ladies, 2 of them left. One of them drove my pickup home, and one of them followed the other one to take it home. And I said, that is so humbling that you did that. And they made the comment that, and they had me read all wrong because they heard I was a wealthy businessman, which is not necessarily the truth. But they said, you were always so respectful that she knew us by name. And I always say benefits, kindness comes full circle. So in that same instance, if I'd have been rude to them, they might have said, well, just lay. I'm sure they wouldn't have let me lay there. But, I had made an impact on them without even realizing it, just by simple. There's not much intelligence required to be kind to individuals.
Mm-mm. You are correct. We teach our kids all the time. I always say, just be kind. You can never go wrong with being kind to, even in a situation that can be a hard one and someone isn't being kind to you, you will win the situation just by being kind back. The way that you react to things is always your choice. So be kind in every chance.
And it's very simple because it doesn't require, like I said, I was never been the sharpest knife in the drawer, although I've tried to. Kindness requires some skill and mindset, but not a whole lot of IQ.
You are correct. Yes.
The kindness is also a testimony to humbleness, because you can be prideful and have things go to your head and just think that you don't have to be kind anymore. How often does that happen? But that kindness, it's a direct correlation with your humility, isn't it?
Yeah, but one thing is I've been seen as different things in my life, some successes, some failures. And the one thing that always comes to mind is, and I think most people that have been so-called successes started somewhere. A few were born into money, but most people started at rock bottom where they probably didn't take a paycheck. So they know what it's like to, like my story with eating $1.99 or 99. The story gets better every year about where I was living. But you start with humble beginnings, and you recognize people that, we all start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I want to kind of jump in a little bit into, you've had a couple things. So even with your successes and everything that you, through, I guess you've had so much determination in every aspect of your life, from looking at how you were raised, never taking that for granted, moving into a leadership role. You've also gone through a couple things that were very unexpected. One being a car accident, and 2 being a spider bite that transformed your life into chronic pain. And nobody likes to live their life with chronic pain, and yet you have done it with grace and had really good days. You've climbed a lot of mountains and adversity. And so, all right, what did you call it? Blessing?
Tragic blessing.
Tragic blessing. So I would love for you to let our audience know a little bit of what you've gone. Just spend a couple of minutes explaining those stories to us.
Well, that's an excellent question. I was 26 years old, and I drove a little S10 pickup, and the reason I bring that up is I got hit by a big Oldsmobile. It was a head-on crash on a blind hill on a gravel road. I was on my way to work, and we met on, like I said, on a gravel road. My pickup was just annihilated. It was just beyond. And the miracle part about Emerald Acres, which is now 69th Street, that's the road I was on.
Okay.
And there was a gentleman watching through binoculars for his daughter's bus, so he was able to. He seen it happen like a half mile away, the collision. So he immediately called 911. And I had lost the ability to breathe. I was unconscious. Both lungs were collapsed, my sternum, and my legs were just smashed. And this isn't a good idea, but I decided that I wasn't going to wear a seatbelt for a while because the tire of the pickup came through, was setting on the seat, and my steering wheel was through the back of the seat. It was that velocity, but I ended up somehow, by God's grace, underneath the dash on top of me on the passenger side. How that happened, only God knows. But right. I was fortunate in that sense. Well, with my legs must have been over there because my legs were, especially my left leg, was broken, just annihilated, which has caused me pain since that time.
Yeah.
But, I was working for Phil Helland at the time who believed in me, and he said, take as much time as you want. I believe I was back to work in limited role in just a few weeks because I was so passionate about what I did and how he treated me through that. So if you look, and I should have brought some pictures of that. It's truly a God thing that I survived that. My life should have been over with by then. So at that time, I lived with pain. I limped from then on. And as a young man, that's not something you wish for.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say it became my signature, but I think it sent a message to someone that you don't have to give up just because something doesn't necessarily go your way.
Mm-hmm.
So then fast forward a few years, and this is so-called one of the adversities I faced. I was in an ownership role, and then my wife, Lisa, and we went to Cozumel, and it's a vacation. It was long overdue. I believe all the kids were born at that time. I was around 40, and I was very fit at that time, which ended up saving my life, I feel. And I did a lot of hiking, and I got stung by a brown recluse spider, which in itself is not really that big a deal. But fortunately, we were back home in the States. And I remember during the night, my oldest son at the time was probably 10 or 11 years old. We went to Salem to a basketball game. We were coming home. I started getting really disillusioned. My leg swelled up during the night. I should have went in that night, but my left leg was over twice the size of my other leg by the next morning. I was very incoherent. So my wife, Lisa, took me to ER. They took my blood pressure and they said, you're going right to, there's something, you've got an infection, you're septic, and still not thinking it was life-threatening. And they could not figure it out at that time. And then it just kept getting worse. You could just feel the infection moving up my leg. And it turned out to be, and I'll turn this story around at the time. There was a gentleman, I think he was interning in Fargo, North Dakota. For some reason, he was at Sioux Valley at that time hospital, and he had been educated or did a residency in Orange County, California, which brown recluse are in a warmer climate are more common. And he had one of his medical profs really pound into their head. You'll probably never see this in your career. It's called necrotizing fasciitis, or in layman's term, flesh-eating infection, but I want you to know how to treat it. So the surgeons at the time had really no way how to approach it. And at that point, I was basically dying. They didn't know what to do. And he came here, and I just remember him. And by that time, it seemed like he was a priest. He was dressed in black, and I'm not Catholic by faith, but it seemed like he was a priest. And he was actually the surgeon directing this. I remember him whispering, "You're going to make this."
Oh.
And my father and mother were there, and my wife, and it was very incoherent. I remember I was going into surgery. I remember the room, all these cold metal surroundings, the room. I remember it being very cold, and I'm thinking, well, is this going to be the last vision I have of Earth? And my father, who was a farmer, and that generation was never real sappy or told they loved me that much. And I remember when I'd get in trouble, he'd always point that crooked finger at me and direct me. And I remember him very distinctly that day pointing at me, and he said, "Do not give up whatever you do, you'd never give up.
Oh,
And that's etched in my mind.
your father.
My father, and he's deceased now. He was blessed with Parkinson's disease also. And from then on, I survived. They did, I think, close to 20 surgeries over the next 2 weeks. Because basically you have to fight it like wildfire. You have to get ahead of it. You have to remove the tissue because it spreads at an inch an hour. They stopped it at my hip or groin area, so they had to remove some tendons. But it was right at the point where it was do or die, where I was near death. And then after 2 months in intensive care, and I remember it was Good Friday, and I wanted to go home in the worst way.
Yeah.
And by the time I got home, I wanted to go back because that becomes your incubator. Yeah, I remember going outside of the hospital, and I could smell exhaust. You could just smell life in general, things you overlook. And now I look back, how in the world, where did that 2 months go? 2 months out of your life. And I remember very little. But the thing that at times since then I've had down times or adversity, I'll never forget that look and my father pointing at me. And we'll talk about several months ago, I had something which is quite life-changing. I remember that where it flashed through my mind, can I make it through this again? I was kind of doing the woe is me story, which I never tried to. And my father's words came back to me.
Don't give up.
Don't ever give up.
Yeah.
So that sustained me. And I'm not saying that's the only thing that sustained me, but in life I can tell most people is just things are, for everybody, are going to get tough at times, but you just try to get through it.
Mm-hmm. You do.
And God will give us certain powers we'll never realize we ever possessed.
To go back to that doctor, I remember when we had this conversation before, didn't you say that like he was renowned, like he was somebody from, like he came out of nowhere. He wasn't even supposed to be there or something. And
no, he happened to be on call that night. And he did. I never met him after the surgery. I just remember this foggy figure in the surgery room giving me. And from then on, I guess my mother and father begged him to stay, but he had to leave. But he was kind of like
like an angel.
Completely. Exactly.
Yeah.
An angel. And I believe that was God's presence that was felt strongly. And I've had several of those moments I can recognize in my life. Now, when you're in this deep pit, God does step up and nudge you with certain signs. And I just had a sign from that the other night, a statement my son had made. And we'll probably talk about that a little later.
Yep. So, car accident to a spider bite that turns into flesh-eating disease, to 2 months in the hospital, you recover, you come out, and did you go right back into being a business owner and hit it hard?
I was a little over exuberant. Some days after being on your back for so long, and that time it took me, but I was back to work fairly shortly. I remember the neighbors joked, they knew it wouldn't take long before they'd see that pickup back out of the garage and me going back to work. So I started going back part days in the community. And I think that's why I appreciate Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I love people to this day. Everybody's got a story, and people just came out of the woodwork. It almost got to be a little overwhelming because this was an unusual illness, not something you hear about every day.
Yeah.
My employees and just individuals as a whole have just, and other things too. You talk about the world not being a real pleasant. In life, this life is hard. It's difficult. We live in a broken world, but there's so many great people that just, and all you don't even have to ask. They just come out of nowhere. And I think we're still somewhat of a Midwest rural community because, you have small town upbringing and there's just so many genuine people.
There are. That is one thing that my husband and I will say often is, we live in a small community, but I mean, it's beautiful. Some people are like, how do you live in a town of 600 people? And easily, because everybody there is so beautiful and amazing. And they're like, a lot of them have become family to us. And our kids get to go to a smaller school that they get a lot of hands-on, beautiful attention from these great teachers.
And that's Hills Beaver Creek.
Yeah, Hills Beaver Creek.
They have a pretty successful athletic program.
Yeah, they do.
Because I remember my oldest son playing basketball, and they were always he went to Sioux Falls Christian, they'd always scrap it out.
Yeah.
My son was kind of an aggressive basketball player to the point I'd have to tell him no technical fouls this game. But that's a long time ago, and hopefully he doesn't hear this. He'd say my filter's gone.
He will probably say, yeah, that was me. Yeah, being that aggressive athlete. There's more to your story where I like, and when I was talking to you about the business owner piece, because there's a lot of misconception about business owners, and you're the CEO of a business, and you make all this money, and you're in the upper echelon and all these different things. And I live with, and I'm married to a business owner who has a lot of stress and a lot of pressure that is on him. And there's a lot of extra hours that go into what he is doing. He's putting his heart and his soul into providing for a family. And that does not come easy. A lot of people will think that, you're at the top, you got it made. And I'm sitting across the table from my husband and you, Paul, and I know that is not the case. And so the stigma on that, I would love for you to speak a little bit, because the time, the pressure, the hours, and all the things that go in with it, what does that do to you, to a man?
Well, you're exactly right. Like most people, and you can see, I don't know if you refer to me as the upper echelon, but I certainly didn't start out that way, nor did I necessarily end that way. But I think in some people's eyes, I was that. And that kind of lends itself back to my story, is if you don't love what you do, or if you plan on working so you can golf on Thursday, and that'll probably come to that point over time, but that's going to take many years before you start showing a profit.
Right.
It takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But the one thing I figured out, and I said this, and that was one of the statements I made to those young ladies that brought me home that night I fell, is they said, one statement you made to us, Paul, is your life became easier and your life became more worthwhile when you started in this business because you love growing in plants, and then you started worrying more about growing your employees, and that's when that made it the most rewarding. She said, that changed my perspective so much. She said, and I didn't even realize I said anything of the sort, but she remembered that from years earlier, and she said that always changed my misconception of so-called business owners, and I'm not putting myself on the wealth pedestal, but successful people as a whole.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful what we say, whether it's, because we can make a difference in somebody's life, especially our employees, either in a positive or negative way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure our talk today is going to be positive. Our goal is always to have a positive ending. And in a control, you can use power in two different ways. You can either use it in a dictatorship type of way where everybody shudders when you walk by, or do it being more charismatic and if you've got an employee or co-worker that's down on their luck, you help them out, you send them a meal, you pat them on the back. I was always more management by walking around. I think there's a professional term with that. But I was more of an encourager, and I'm not saying that's the right or wrong way to do it, but most people do not take advantage of you. And respect is something that most people crave.
Mm-hmm. And encouragement, respect, encouragement, being seen. We talk about that a lot, about how important it is for all the employees, anybody in this world that is walking around just wants to be noticed, to be seen, to know that they're on this earth and acknowledged.
And I remember you talking about skipping paychecks, and so that was all part of that. Your employees don't need to know that, nor do they have to, or not necessarily your spouse all the time, but there's times you have to make sacrifice. And I never tried to bring that home to the kids. And I heard a parable or a story about this once, where this gentleman would always follow this older gentleman in, and he'd always grab this branch of this tree and give it a pull before he walked in the house. He asked him why he did that, and he said, I'm leaving all my troubles at the door. That way I can spend quality time with my family, and then I can pick them. And you've probably heard this story.
Yeah, it's a great one, though.
Pick them back up tomorrow, but when you're home, you're home. Mm-hmm. And it took me quite a few years to figure that out.
It took same here, Paul. It took 5 years, 6 years to figure that out. And once you go there, you never want to go back. I mean, never. Once you start leaving at the door, am I right? Then you start to develop this muscle that says, no, I'm not going to take time away from my family.
That is true, because like, you live and breathe that. That's your passion. And we get our faith in God needs to be number one on the list, our family second.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, our career. But we don't necessarily, unfortunately, I had them out of order for quite a few years.
Yeah.
Now, it took me all of my 60 plus years to start to figure that out, that family and your faith is the most important thing, and friends.
And unfortunately, people sometimes figure that out when it's too late.
That's exactly right. And I'd like to say one of the questions I want to say is when I do pass away, and hopefully that's not for a while, I think we want to pass away with no regrets, leaving no stones unturned that we miss. And it's very important to me that I didn't mistreat somebody or not have a grudge settled up. And I don't think I have many grudges, but if I do, I want to clear them up or make sure that person knows of certain positive things, the positive things they've helped me with in my life.
Wouldn't it be wonderful because I want to move into the Parkinson's, because that is what you are currently living. You're currently living with a disease that they gave you a time limit. And that is something that it makes my heart pound, Paul, even just saying that, because that is not something that you woke up 40 years ago and thought that that was going to be where you're sitting today, where they say, well, guess what, Paul? You need to quit doing what you love. You need to slow down because you have Parkinson's now. And can you take me to that day when they diagnosed you with that and kind of what you were feeling in that moment?
And I even forget what year it was now, but it's probably been 6 years ago. And then I was in Sioux Falls, and he recommended I go to Iowa City or Mayo Clinic to get to confirm what he thought was happening, as I had Parkinson's disease. I was also weaning myself off a pain med, so my feet were dragging. I was stumbling and not walking as well. So I think I'm probably in it 7 or 8 years where it was showing signs of that. And so that was very difficult. But I went through a period of time where I thought, well, I got this. And they said, well, you got to start backing off your stress, because it's kind of like a feeding frenzy. Like I picture like I don't know if flock's the right philosophy. Piranhas feeding.
Piranha, that's what I was going to say.
Where they attack it. Stress attacks Parkinson's disease and speeds up the process. So they said, try to keep your life as stress-free as possible with raising kids and raising life. So I started to sell out of the business that time. And I was still able to stay pretty involved with it, so I got to back out over a period of time. And still being in denial, like I was doing physical therapy, very faithful about that still to this day, which I've met some wonderful individuals, because like if I wouldn't have been in this situation, the three of us would probably never be talking. I never would have got to know some of these physical therapists that are a big part of my life. So we meet a lot of people on the way, and that's probably God induced. Mm-hmm. So I was still in denial for quite some time. And then about a year ago, then I seen my neurologist, and he sent me to, I always forget, it's a comfort care doctor, basically end-of-life doctor, not, what's the name for it?
Palliative
care.
Yep.
And I was still too naive to really know what that means. Then they put a fuse in my life. They thought it was more of a aggressive form of Parkinson's disease, where I would say 7 years into it, and the basic life expectancy is 8 to 12 years, loosely they put it. Mm-hmm. That's like I got hit right between the head. It's like, geez, I've never had a fuse put in my life. It's like I'm 60 years old now. I'm living on borrowed time. But I've come to believe that nobody can tell you when you're going to expire, and you can only do that by your faith. And there's going to come a time where my life will be finished on that earth, but I'm not dwelling on that right now. The one thing that's been hard to take is I need help with things. And for those of you that I know most, you cannot see this, but I use a walker. I do not drive anymore. I'm really unable to go to my job, so I'm pretty much cooped up in the house, which a couple of those cold mornings last week, that didn't seem like such a bad deal as I was having my morning coffee by the kitchen tables. And that's part of acceptance. And I think God's ready, and along with the help of a lot of great friends, because giving up driving was terrifying to me. I'm like, that's all my independence. Because I was kind of a cruiser. I'd cruise around and I'd love to take country drives. But, so many people have stepped up, picked me up, like my physical therapy, which I go 3 or 4 times a week. And I have a couple cousins that have really stepped up, and my siblings, my kids. And I have a young lady and I got to make sure I say this correctly, a relative who is looking for a place to live. She's 24. She's a teaching assistant, so she moved in with me to help me, because I am a real fall risk, as you can tell by some of my newly.
Yeah. Your new
and I didn't want to be that guy where my kids felt they had to stop every night. I want my kids to stop by when they want to, not that they feel they have to check on me, because I've been because backing up this story a little bit, my dad had severe Parkinson's, and it was and he got Lewy body dementia, which is quite common with Parkinson's. So that I seen a tragic ending of the man I thought was a mountain or my hero. I seen it was a dismal demise, even go to the point to say, if I ever get that, just take me out behind the barn and get rid of me. Now that I have it, I'm not going to go to that length. So I'm not ready to give up yet. But Parkinson's, along with many others, it's such a helpless feeling, because your body and mind says one thing, but it just can't. There's times where you can't execute it because the dopamine's not being fed to your body in the correct amounts. And I'm not a physician, but I know enough to be dangerous.
And for those who don't know what Parkinson's is, what's the main thing about Parkinson's?
Well, I always thought you picture these people shaking uncontrollably.
Like Michael J. Fox, right?
Like Michael J. Fox. And you can kind of see, and you might have pulled my legal pad away because I do have a slight tremor in my hand. But mine is mostly my gait, my balance, where I fall frequently. I cannot walk. It's like when I'm bad, like at night, it's just helpless. It's like I stutter step. It's like my feet it's like a double piston where my feet just pound back and forth. And it's a good workout. It must be a lot like Pilates or something, because it is so wearing on you. But at times I just have to stop, and I've got a seat on my walker, so that's been So and it's the laser beam on it, which makes me step over the line.
Oh, that's neat. Those engineers and how they engineer stuff.
So that's the scene at my house. Step over the line, Dad. Step over the line.
So it doesn't. So it affects your muscles. I mean, a lot of it affects your muscles.
Well, you've seen when we left, I was able to lift my walker down the steps, and I always think I'm such a weak stick now, but I do have some strength left. But it's the control of your muscles.
Control of it. Okay.
How you control them and how you execute your steps. Okay. That's why you always, when another word around our house, of course, is count your steps and step over the line, which is my laser beam.
Okay.
So I've got very good coaches, and my sons are very nice and very supportive, especially my oldest son. They don't coddle me. They use some salty terms once in a while to get their point across. And I won't say those on the air.
Yeah, well, we can use our imagination, that's for sure.
And it's nothing online. They just don't want to see their father give up.
They love
which
you,
I've always raised them that way. You don't give up.
There's a lot of when people are going through, so to speak to those that you've had chronic pain, you've lost your independence, you're young, Paul, you're 60 years old.
Oh, just turned 61, so I look probably older than the first time you met me.
No, well, happy birthday, by the way.
Well, thank you. That was just
recent.
this past Sunday. I had to get that in there in case anybody wants to send me any cash or gifts.
There probably will be, because I
and a card would be fine too.
A thought on my heart right now is, you mentioned if you don't want to leave with any unturned, like you don't ever want to go out with any regrets or any, like if there was ever a time that someone that you touched their lives, or there was a time that you said something like the gas station ladies, for those who are listening to this, because this podcast has recently reached people all over the world. And so with the amount of people that you've touched, Paul, I am going to just throw it out there that if there is a story or there is a situation that somebody wants to reach out to you and love on you and tell you the impact that you've had on their life, reach out to me. I want to be the one to help deliver those messages to you, because there's nothing more just loving than to really tell somebody the impact that you have had on their life. Like, what a legacy for you to be able to read that and hear those special stories. And so I've only known you for a short few months, and I can tell you that you've touched my life in a really big way. And so I just am really grateful for you.
Well, that's very kind. And I don't know, I think I acquired that through those setbacks, because, I was the normal man, probably I was a confident man. God has a way of humbling you over time. And my speech is kind of wavering a little bit now. Hopefully I can hold up here for a while. And I think I'm doing pretty good so far.
We got just a few minutes left, so you're doing great.
And this is getting a little emotional, and I keep saying but, which drives me nuts.
You're fine.
You're okay.
You're fine.
So, but take that opportunity. I have become, and it's given me like when somebody dies suddenly, they don't have a chance to say goodbye. I'm not saying I'm on my victory tour, because I'm not giving up. Hopefully I'm going to outwit the doctors in this whole thing, and I have many years left. But anytime you have an opportunity to touch people, especially if there's somebody that manages people, or you don't have to manage people, say you're working at the convenience store like those young ladies I talked about, you can make somebody's day with a single impact. And when I went through a very depressive time several years ago, I just thought, God, I'm going to pick myself up, and if I can have an impact on one person a day, and that's the old cliche, but that in a year's time, and if those people pass that on to somebody else, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people over time. And that's what I like. I'm so proud of you two. You went through some adversity, and now you're making something great out of it. And you've both, and I'm throwing this right back at you. You've made both of you have made an impact in my life. I ran into a gentleman that used to work for a landscape garden center, and we had a nice conversation as we walked in. I guess he's recently joined Trey Ministries, which hopefully that works out well for everybody.
Tim, who's out there, yeah. In how you've kept a positive attitude, I think is what has really touched my life and will touch thousands of listeners that listen to this podcast, because you have dealt with something continuously, the ups, the downs, the valleys, the mountaintops, and you're living with chronic pain and with a disease that is inevitably going to take your life. And not only that, Paul, but I know just recently you're in the middle of a divorce.
Yes, unfortunately with that, and there's a lot of stress leading up to that, and that's pretty raw and emotional right now, so I don't want to lean into that too much, but that has caused a tremendous amount of stress in my life. So for any listeners out there is don't give up and appreciate what you have. Just cultivate your marriage, because like we talked about earlier, your wife and children should be next to God, the highest on your list. And hopefully somehow through all this, I can add that as something I can probably help somebody else through someday, because it appears to be inevitable, which is not what, you don't get married to get divorced. Nobody starts in that manner. But with my kids' help and others, and not only this, through my health things. And so I'm so humbled. I don't think I ever have to cook again. I was never really a coffee drinker, but so many people have taken me out for coffee this summer. I've acquired a taste. So it's just, and I'm just so humbled, because I wouldn't say thousands, but there's hundreds of people that have given me encouragement since. It's very noticeable there's something wrong with me. And what I admired about you, one of the first times I met you, is I believe that was the first or second time, and I was fortunate enough to sit by you. A lot of people give you that cold, glassy stare, like, what's this guy? He's not 80 years old. He's got a walker. What's wrong? And you just simply asked me, what's with the walker? It was very calm. It wasn't in my face. And I've noticed since then, you are very open about that. So it was very comforting. That led in. And I wasn't insulted and on. I think it led into a very good conversation and led to this. We have a common friend with Sandy Bourbon, who's a wonderful individual. So once I knew you were on her good list, I was sold. Yeah.
I've had so many incredible things happen just by asking a simple question. I mean, look at the door that opened up by, you sat down next to me. I'm like, what's with the walker? Like, what's your story? And I remember you gave me kind of a look like, well, wow, okay. Okay. She's like, we're going there. It was so, and then we just talked. And from that moment on, like you're sitting here now with me today. And so I just encourage people all the time to, again, we've said it so many, be kind, but just ask people their story. Ask people to just tell you a little bit about what's going on, and then to ask them how we can serve them. How can I serve you? How can I love on you? Right? Like it's such a simple thing. And yet I don't think people do it enough.
But you said, I don't claim to have a high IQ because everybody's your superior in some way. I don't think we dwell on that, whether you're a CEO of a company and I'm picking on dishwashers because I think there is absolutely no shame in being a dishwasher, but
no.
You should treat everybody the same way, and wherever you're at, whatever interaction, whether they have a big scar on their forehead from a recent fall or a big nose like I do.
Hey,
I'm picking on myself now, making light.
You're a handsome fella, Paul. So you're, even with your gashes and it's just, now it's more character.
Well, that's what I said. I look more like Clint Eastwood now. You got to make light of these things. So, but I've had some out of this thing. This has been, I know this has been the most challenging 6 months of my life, no doubt about it. And it did run through my mind. I think this, I wouldn't say I was on the verge because I said to myself, what do I have left to live for? Mm-hmm. It's almost like there was thoughts in my mind. There are certain nights I just don't know if I can do this anymore. It's not like I wanted to end my life, but I just didn't know if I had the strength to go on with the constant pain. Because it's something, chronic pain, people don't realize you can never take a break. It's like, okay, I'm going to take a half-hour break. And it's hard to sleep, so you very seldom sleep well. So it's that constant, and this is not a woe is me story, but I want to tell people out there that know somebody that's experiencing that, don't feel like they're a whiner if they're getting down, because you got to go to a special place in your mind to seek your own special hiding place, because it is unrelenting. Mm-hmm. And then with Parkinson's going south, now I don't know if it's going to level out, and I'm not giving up. Another thing that has really occurred to me, I never would have had a chance to meet, and physical therapists are special people because they need to know who to push and who to pull back. And most of the time they had to pull me back. And I have a gal I met, and I called out of the blue because I was on my way back from Mayo Clinic with my wife, and all of a sudden they send you on your way with a couple brochures. Well, I've got Parkinson's disease, and you're riding back. There's no and I couldn't find any health groups. So I called, which was Orthopedic Institute, and I talked to a gal. Her name is Stephanie Myers, and she's a physical therapist. I thought she was maybe a counselor or something that I could go talk to get a checkup from the neck up, which she has given me plenty. And she said, well, you have to schedule and you have to come into therapy. So reluctantly I did. And she's made such an impact, as well as Amanda, and and others that have made. They're very special because you have to motivate people, give them hope. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm not giving up on that, because that's the only thing proven to extend your life. And you don't die from Parkinson's, you die with it. Like I recently acquired a kidney infection, a urinary tract infection. And that's basically, as time goes on, you're more prone, your body's worn down, so you die of something else. So I say I'm not going to die of Parkinson's. I'll probably eventually die from it. And I always tell my kids that's going to be a long time away. And first of all, you kids got to start having grandkids.
Yeah, you need some grandbabies. Yes, you do.
I'm not going to go out of this world without grandkids. And I said, my oldest son's father-in-law is named Paul too. And I said, but I got the first name. You can name him Paul.
Paul.
And that's bad dad humor, I know.
That's all right. I'm familiar with it. I live with him. He's got
plenty of them.
Yeah. And hopefully I'm not getting off track here, but you've had some tremendous questions, and just keep firing away. Nothing's out of bounds.
We are actually out of time, but I do want to end with one thing, because you told this a very beautiful but very touching story about your son. And you were recently at the Brandon Steakhouse for your birthday, and you had your walker, and you were going to the bathroom, and your son said to you, Dad, let go. I got you. I got you.
Yeah, it was interesting. And there was a hallway going in, which is kind of narrow, and the doorway was narrow. So he just said, Dad, just let go of your walker, leave it here. And I wasn't walking very good at that time, so I had almost froze, and I stumbled and fell. And he said, just calm down, Dad. Don't be scared. He said, I got you, and I'm not going to let you fall. Mm-hmm. And I'm getting kind of emotional with this. And then I was doing my devotions the next morning. I thought, it's kind of like human beings in life. We hang on to certain things that we need to let go of. Because
God's got us.
Because God's got us, and we hang on with all our life. And when you finally do let go, He may let us fall or stumble, but He's always going to pull us back up in some way or another. So and I got to share this with my son tonight now that it's in the archives, because hopefully he'll hear this someday. But it was so powerful. It just jumped. It's like I didn't realize it at the time. And then I got back to the table, and the young lady that's helping care for me, my steak was all cut up, and I'm like, who did that? And she had done. And I thought, I have a pretty good life.
You got a lot of people that love you, Paul.
So you can look at it two ways. You can either mope around and be miserable the rest of your life, or try to, and believe me, today's a good day. I'm physically doing well, and I think I'm talking pretty well, because it does affect speech, but it's a pretty incredible life. I went through some highs and lows, but there's a lot of good ahead of this for this old fellow.
Paul, can you talk to that person going through something hard that didn't have a dad or a mom to tell them to not give up? What would you say to them?
I would say put your faith in God, and God has revealed Himself, and He does to everybody in certain ways, but find yourself, and mentors come in all shapes and sizes. Like I have mentors, like I would consider you two a mentor of mine now going forward. Hopefully you can stop over and visit me sometime, because there's so much wisdom. Like I need mentors and then Sandy Bourbon's son came to me. So if anybody could come to me, but mentors, find a mentor, find a businessman, find a pastor, find somebody. If you don't have the family support, there's so many people that it's like laughing on the outside, crying on the inside. So most people have gone through something that they're just very willing to help you out. So sometimes you have to seek individuals like that out. But like I told my story, I'm just overwhelmed by people giving me rides, bringing me food, just giving me encouraging thoughts. It's just been, it humbles me. It almost makes me cry on the air right now. And I have got close a couple times. So, but I'm just so thankful to have this opportunity. And hopefully I answered your question.
My takeaway from that, first of all, is your amazing attitude, because you're dealing with this disease, and you're still saying to us, can you be my mentor? And you still have that attitude of mentorship. You're seeking out mentorship. You said you're 61. You said
yes,
and still seeking out mentors. That's incredible. What a powerful takeaway for people who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s now.
Never stop learning.
Still always be learned, always grow, and find people to push you.
Yes.
I agree. And like I said, it takes people to hold you accountable. Like my son that made that profound statement the other night, my younger son and my daughter. It's like, it's as simple as that. You can make this is step over look at your line, Dad, step over the line, count your steps. I can still count. And all I got to do is count to 10, then I can start over. I don't have to go to 13 or anything. So my kids have been remarkable as far as people around me too. And life, like I said, I'm recently coming through a very low, very steep valley in my life, but I'm expecting to come out of this, as God has always proven me in the past I will. So hopefully this was worthwhile, and I always make a goal to touch one person a day. And as I was telling Heather on the way, maybe I can take the rest of the week off now. Maybe I touch 3 or 4.
You will touch hundreds, if not thousands. So thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your story, Paul, and with the world and with the audience. You're a blessing.
Well, thank you, and hopefully I was helpful for both of you.
You were.
And everybody
Absolute
else.
Pleasure. Thank you, Paul.